Kubo's official fan club, Club Outside, appears to be the gift that keeps on giving. Through the question and answer section of the website, we've had some answers to some pressing questions regarding Bleach. But this is the first time that we've had a question about the nature of Ichigo Zanpakuto in its final form. In this video, we're going to discuss the dual nature of Zangetsu, why Zangetsu had returned to a single blade at the end of the 1000-year Blood War arc, and during the recently released New Breeds from Hell chapter. This is going to be a very exciting Bleach breakdown and explain video, because we're discussing a topic that Kubo has never mentioned before in detail. So with the help of Kubo's comments, let's explain the final form of Ichigo Zanpakuto, Zangetsu. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. For the sake of context, let's briefly talk about the changes that occur with Ichigo Zanpakuto during the 1000-year Blood War arc, so that we can understand the new dual-bladed form of Ichigo Zanpakuto. So when Ichigo's Bankai is broken at the hands of Yhwach, he quickly learns that he did not possess the true form of his Zanpakuto. Instead, he had been wielding a blade from his inherited fusion of his Shinigami and Hollow powers. When Dual Zangetsu relinquishes the hold that he has on Ichigo's powers, he is then able to finally have his Zanpakuto personally reforged by the creator of the Zanpakuto, Uetsu Nimaya. Ichigo's new Zanpakuto had actually been forged within Asuchi. In chapter 547, we learned that the true form of Ichigo's Zanpakuto takes the shape of two separate complete black blades. Now this form that we see in chapter 547 is referred to as Ichigo's Zanpakuto's true Shikai form. Now one of the blades that Ichigo is wielding is roughly the same size as Ichigo's previous Zanpakuto. One important detail to note about this new blade is that there is a thin hollowed out segment which runs from the base of the blade all the way down to the middle of it. Now this is an important detail that we're going to come back to when we discuss how Ichigo activates his Bankai in this new Shikai form. Now in the other hand, Ichigo is wielding a second much smaller blade. It resembles more of a dagger than a complete sword. This blade has an enclosed handle, and unlike the larger blade, it is completely filled. Each of these blades represents a different part of Ichigo's powers. The larger blade represents Ichigo's Shinigami and Hollow powers combined, whereas the smaller blade represents Dual Zangetsu, which of course was Ichigo's manifestation of his Quincy powers. In chapter 678, we see how Ichigo activates his Bankai in his new Shikai state. He does so by placing the two blades of his Shikai side by side. This results in a surge of energy engulfing the swords. This reveals a totally new form of Tensar Zangetsu, where we have a black portion running through the middle of it, and the outer portion of the blade is encased in this white shell. Now the changes that occur to Ichigo Zanpakuto in chapter 684 confuses a lot of people, and admittedly it had even confused me the first time that I had read this chapter. Now when Yhwach attempts to destroy Ichigo's Tensar Zangetsu for the second time during their final battle, something very important happens here. Instead of all of the sword breaking, only the outer white portion of the sword breaks off, thus revealing a blade that is completely identical to the original form of Ichigo's Shikai, Zangetsu. Now there is a misconception that we need to clear, and it's the belief that Ichigo no longer has his Quincy and Hollow powers because Yhwach had absorbed them in chapter 680. We see these black veins surround Ichigo as he realizes that his Quincy and Hollow powers have faded away. While it is true that Ichigo's powers had been absorbed here, this situation appears to have been remedied by the intervention of both Orihime and Tsukishima. Thanks to Tsukishima, the past had been altered, thus reverting Ichigo Zanpakuto to a time before Yhwach had stolen his Hollow and Quincy powers, thus allowing Orihime to restore Tensar Zangetsu to its original state, meaning that when Ichigo had confronted Yhwach in his final encounter, he had all of his abilities and Bankai restored. So this now brings us to the question that was presented to Kubo on Club Outside. The individual asks Kubo, why is it that Zangetsu had returned to a single blade? They even theorize if this is because Yhwach had stolen Ichigo's Quincy and Hollow powers, resulting in Ichigo being unable to return to his dual-bladed state. Personally, this is how I had theorized the change in Ichigo's Zanpakuto prior to getting this answer from Kubo and researching for this video. Now, the question concludes by asking Kubo if it is possible for Ichigo to return to his dual-bladed Shikai state. Kubo answers the question by saying that although this hasn't been touched upon in detail, since I don't plan on expanding upon this topic any further, I'm going to answer your question here. The Dual Zangetsu is made up of the blade and the scabbard. The correct form of a Zanpakuto is one that includes a scabbard, and there are only two blades without one. The first being Sayofushi, which of course is the Zanpakuto of Uetsu Nimaya, and the second is Zangetsu, which we know is Ichigo Zanpakuto. The dual blade state fixes Blade Zangetsu into its correct form, while its Bankai state provides the scabbard, and what was seen after it had shattered is the true Zangetsu. The shattered scabbard was absorbed by Ichigo, so if he wants to, he could split it back into two, but I guess that depends on Ichigo himself. So this response has a lot to take in, and to be honest, I was still confused until I had started researching for this video. Now let's break down each segment of this response and try to understand what Kubo means. So we know that Ichigo's Dual Blade Zanpakuto is made up of a blade and a scabbard. Now this is fascinating, and it's a new point that Kubo mentions that is so easily overlooked within the manga. I personally had never paid attention to any of the Shinigami scabbards. Now with this information, we learned that a Zanpakuto is made up of two components, the blade and its scabbard. It's not just the blade on its own, which I and others I'm sure had assumed. This ends up explaining why Ikkaku holds his Zanpakuto in one hand and his scabbard in the other, and he brings them together in order to activate his Shikai. I really had no idea that both parts form the Zanpakuto, and it is fascinating to learn this from Kubo. So Kubo continues by saying that the only two Zanpakuto without a scabbard are Saiyafushi, which is Uetsu Nimaya's Zanpakuto, and Zangetsu. Now this of course is referring to the state of Ichigo's Zanpakuto prior to training with Uetsu Nimaya, because after Ichigo completes his training, we see the dual-bladed state of Zangetsu, which Kubo refers to as its correct form. Now when it comes to Uetsu Nimaya, he was unable to create a scabbard for his Zanpakuto, and it is for this reason that he considers his Zanpakuto to be incomplete. Now this further emphasizes the importance of a scabbard. Now paying attention to the dual-bladed Shikai state of Ichigo, we can see that the long sword forms the scabbard and the short sword is the blade. The dual blade state makes Ichigo very unique because the two parts of his Zanpakuto are separated, but when Ichigo activates his Bankai, he places the short sword on top of the long sword, thus transforming it into his new Tensar Zangetsu blade. Now in this completed form of Tensar Zangetsu, we can see an inner black portion which is surrounded by a white shell. The white is in fact the Zanpakuto scabbard, while the black is the blade. So when the white shell or the scabbard of Tensar Zangetsu is broken, it reveals the true form of Zangetsu underneath. The outside white portion of Ichigo's Bankai was broken by Yhwach's final blow. This white shell had represented Ichigo's Quincy powers shattering, but we learned from Kubo that these Quincy powers had been reabsorbed into Ichigo, and at the same time he had continued swinging this newly revealed real Zangetsu, which represents Ichigo's hollow and Shinigami powers. Now this blade takes the form of the very familiar Shikai Zangetsu that we have seen Ichigo use throughout the series, and it's the form that Yhwach has a dream of when he sees Ichigo defeat him. So when the white scabbard that was shattered ended up being reabsorbed back into Ichigo, this had also changed the shape of his Zanpakuto in its Shikai state. Now Kubo ambiguously states that it is now up to Ichigo whether if he wants to return the shape of his Zanpakuto into the dual-bladed Shikai state, or to just leave it in its current form that we see during the end of the 1000-year Blood War arc and the New Breeds from Hell chapter. So to now finally answer all of your questions, why did Ichigo's Zanpakuto not return to its dual-bladed form? Well, it's because Ichigo doesn't feel like it. And no, this isn't a mistake on Kubo's part. He didn't forget to draw the dual-bladed Shikai form. This was an intentional choice by Kubo. Ichigo has in his possession all of his powers, so it makes sense if he is able to form them and use them however he chooses to. After learning about all of this, I honestly pray that this is expanded upon within the anime adaptation, and I really want to learn more about this and see it explained within the story in some capacity, even if Kubo explains it in the new Hell arc that he is releasing. Ichigo is a very unique Shinigami in that he possesses a Zanpakuto that has Quincy, Shinigami, and Hollow powers, so it is understandable that the nature of his powers and the form of his Zanpakuto can be somewhat confusing. Prior to receiving this answer from Kubo, I had even come up to wrong conclusions about Ichigo's Zanpakuto, and I'm so grateful for Club Outside for providing us with this answer. I know that at the time of uploading this video, this was a pretty old topic, but I wanted to properly understand Kubo's answer and to research this for myself instead of rushing out and making a video on it. Now we're at the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What did you think about my explanation of Kubo's answer? For me, this brings much needed clarity to Ichigo's Zanpakuto and its final form, and why his Zanpakuto did not return to its dual-bladed state. And no, this wasn't because Yhwach had stolen his Quincy and Hollow powers. The answer is much more simple. It's because Ichigo doesn't want to use his Shikai in a dual-bladed state. Do you accept this answer, or do you think that there is more to what Kubo had said? Definitely continue the discussion in the comments, and thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach breakdown and explained video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.